Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about what to do if you're visiting Warsaw, Poland. I'll also go over how easy it is to get there and to get around, some of the safety concerns that you might have if you're going there, talk a little bit about walkability, accessibility, community, and then I'll finish off with how much I spent for my time there. So whether you're thinking of visiting for just a couple of days or for a longer period, this will give you some sense of what to expect when you go. If you're new here, my name is Kiria. I'm an avid traveler, and last year I retired early to travel the world full time. So without further ado, let's get started. So for visas, Poland is in the Schengen zone, which means that you can only be in the Schengen zone for 90 out of the last 180 days. So if you are traveling in and out of the Schengen zone, that is something you'll have to keep track of. Additionally, there is going to be an electronic version of the visa so that they can keep track of you, but that keeps getting pushed back, and right now it's showing that probably won't take effect until some point in late 2026. Just for reference, that's called the ETIAS. Getting to Warsaw is very easy. There are several flights in and out, and getting from the airport to the city center is also quite easy as well. It only takes about 30 minutes on a bus or a train, and I recommend downloading the transportation app, which I know I will mispronounce completely, so I'm just going to put the name of it on the screen. But what you can do is you can download this app, and then you can load up some zlotys on the app, and then after that you can use the zlotys on any train or bus that you take. Now, there is a verification system, so once you get on the bus, you have to just use the app to verify yourself, and each bus has a number, so you basically just type in the number of the bus. It's very easy to use, and I found it a lot easier than trying to find the machine and pay each time that I took any form of transportation. However, there are also machines on the platforms, so if you take the tram, for instance, there's usually a machine on the platform. If you take the metro, there's a machine just outside the gates, and I did have to use this as well, and so it's not very hard, but you'll just get a little paper ticket that you then stick into the gate instead. Unfortunately, you can't tap to pay with your card yet. To get from the airport, it costs roughly $1.25. You can also take the bus into town, which is what I did. I came in from Vilnius, Lithuania, and when you do that, you have a couple different options for stops. So what I did was I got off at the Marymont metro station, which is kind of north of the central part of town, but you can also take the bus all the way to the Warsaw West station, which, as its name implies, is to the west of the center of town. For me, it made more sense since I was coming from the north, to just get off in the north. And when I left, I actually was heading west, so I left through the west station instead. So this is something like I took Flixbus, and you could use either option. If you get off at the Marymont station, the bus station, there's a metro right there. So it's super easy to get on the metro and go downtown from there. And if you go to the west station, when I left town, I used a bus to go to the bus station, and that was very easy as well. You can also take the train to get into town. From the center area, that's about a 15-minute tram ride, or basically 1 mile if you decide to walk. So it's not too far away. And again, if you take the tram from the train station, it really helps to have the app. So I was going to talk about public transportation next, but I guess I already covered that. So the next thing is green space. I didn't go too far out of town, but where I was staying in the center, there's a huge park called the Royal Baths Park, which is really nice to walk around. There's a bunch of fountains, there are little restaurants, there's a castle, and it's very easy to walk to from the center area of town. You can also go walk along the river, and on the river there are restaurants and other things like that. So you can walk for a long ways on the river and stop at a restaurant anytime you get a little tired. So for walkability, it's super easy to walk around. Like I said, there are good sidewalks. And actually, one thing I really like about Polish people, as far as I've seen, is if you step out into the street, the cars actually stop, which is not always the case in some other places. So it's very nice, even in a city, to have the drivers actually stop when you're thinking about crossing. So for walkers, I feel that it's quite safe. However, if you do have any accessibility issues, the Old Town area does have some little bit narrower sidewalks and some cobblestones and things like that. But otherwise, like I said, there's a walkway on the river, which is quite nice, and the sidewalks are quite wide. And so I think it's very easy to get around. For running, as I mentioned, you can run along the river, you can run in the park, There's plenty of places to run. And I always like to get up early before the crowds come out and go to a lot of the touristy destinations then. So I will often run to the touristy destinations, take my pictures without everybody there, and then come back and wander and stroll and not have to worry about trying to go to anywhere when it's super crowded. As far as biking, I didn't bike in Warsaw myself, but I did notice there were good cycle lanes and plenty of people were biking. And like I said, along the river, there's actually a dedicated lane for cyclists and a dedicated lane for walkers, so you're not commingling the two. For accommodation, I stayed basically in the center of town at the Sheraton. So I used my points for this, and that was roughly 24,000 points a night. But the good thing about the Sheraton is that I have status there, and so I got to use the lounge. And so you'll notice when I go over my costs, I basically did not spend almost zero money on food because of that. I'll give you a quick tour around right now of that. Welcome to Warsaw. So I am at the Sheraton Warsaw. Got an upgrade. I'm on the club level. I'm right next to the lounge, and I'm going to definitely take advantage of all the food. I know I did a video recently about not really liking living in a hotel all the time, but it is nice once in a while when you haven't been in a hotel for a while and you can take advantage of the amenities. So let me give you a quick run through of the room. Here we go. We've got a huge bed, I don't even know, big old king, and nice little coffee maker, plenty of outlets next to the beds. You do have to love staying in a hotel where it is the way that you know it's going to be instead of being in a random Airbnb all the time. Some coffee. I think I might have one of those. Nice little couch. I might not leave the hotel. I got a welcome amenity, which I'm going to have for lunch in a minute. And we've got some water. I will... Oh, look at this. Even more of these things. Nice. And yeah, so that's the main room. And then we've got a nice bathroom tub. Maybe I'll take a bath. I love having nice amenities too. I'm gonna do some good grooming. We got a little shaver thing. Got a scale, so I think I'm gonna weigh my luggage, right? I think I need to weigh my luggage. I'm flying in about a week, so a little more than a week. But I can weigh my luggage and see how heavy it really is. This is nice. We've got the lotions, all the stuff. I didn't see a hairdryer though. I don't know if I'm blind. Am I blind? I don't think there's a hairdryer here, which is very odd. Maybe you have to just request it. All right. Welcome to Warsaw. The Sheraton is about 3 kilometers from the Old Town, so roughly about 2 miles. So for a normal stroll pace, that's about a 40-minute walk. So it's not super close to the Old Town, but I did like the location because the Old Town is good, but for me, that's only a half a day of stuff. And then after that, I want to find other things to look at. So it's not really super important for me to be right in the middle of the Old Town. It was very close to the park, the Royal Baths Park. So that was nice. And then also there were a ton of different eating possibilities that were a little less expensive because they weren't right in the middle of the Old Town. For payment methods, you can pretty much use your card everywhere. I did need cash to tip the walking tour guide. And also there were a couple of toilets that you had to pay for, so it was good to have a few zlotys on you. But otherwise, pretty much everything is card. And like I said, with the metro and everything, you have the app, so you don't really need too much cash. I actually ended up with some cash left over, and when I left Poland, I just used it at the airport to buy a bunch of way overpriced candy because I didn't want to have a bunch of zlotys with me after that. For language barrier, there were no issues at all. The weather in Warsaw when I was there was probably in the mid-70s, and that was at the end of July. So it wasn't super, super hot. And then it does get below freezing in the wintertime and gets approximately 633 millimeters of rain, which I will put the conversion for that on the screen. For medical, from what I've heard from residents, it is free, but sometimes there are long wait times. And if you're an expat, you might have possible language issues with the free version. So a lot of people will get private insurance, which may be faster or have a better chance of the doctor speaking English. For food and water, tap water is drinkable and there are no food safety issues. There are embassies for many, many different countries, including the US, Canada, the UK, and 95 other countries around the world. For safety, according to Numbeo, the crime index is 19.6, which is low. and lower is better. And the safety is 80.4, which higher is better. So it's actually quite safe with very low crime. And as a solo traveler, as far as safety goes, I didn't feel unsafe at all wandering around at night. There's a lot of people out on their own, so it was not really any big deal. As far as community, since I was only in Warsaw for about 4 days, I didn't really look into that as much. But I'm assuming that since it's a large city, it has quite a good expat community. So I know you're wondering now, what is there to do? Well, the big attraction is the Old Town, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And if you know anything about Warsaw, you'll know that it was mostly completely bombed. And so the Old Town has been rebuilt, but they've rebuilt it all in the old style. So it's really fun to just walk around. There's plenty of ice cream shops, which, is good, especially in July when it's hot, and just things to look at. There's also the Warsaw Museum is in the Old Town, and you'll find other things there like the Basilica of St. John the Baptist, which is a Gothic cathedral that dates back to the 14th century, or the Royal Castle, which was once the residence of Polish monarchs. And just like most of the Old Town was reconstructed after the war, but now houses art, royal apartments, and state treasuries. There's also the Barbican, which dates back to the 16th century. And of course, just like most Barbicans, it was a defensive structure and it marks the edge of the Old Town. But a little bit different than the rest of the Old Town, this Barbican is actually one of the only remaining structures that wasn't completely reconstructed or completely demolished. In the Old Town too, you'll also find the mermaid statue, which is a big draw for everybody and is a symbol of Warsaw's strength and resilience. So aside from the Old Town, there are several other things to do. One thing that I really enjoyed was you can take a free ferry across the river into the Praga neighborhood. And in the Praga neighborhood, there's tons of bars and restaurants and stuff, but there's also a lot of murals, which you can go and look at, which are quite cool. A lot of them, of course, have a resistance vibe, which is interesting. If you haven't watched The Pianist, you should definitely watch that before you go to Warsaw. You can also go and check out the Palace of Culture and Science. This is over by the central metro station. Supposedly, it was a gift from Stalin, and it is a very large, imposing building, and it has been nicknamed Stalin's Rocket or Stalin's sometimes other nicknames that I will not repeat. You should go look them up yourself. But you can go up to the top floor where there's an observation deck and you can get a good view of the city from there. After you go check out Stalin's Rocket, if you just walk straight from the Rocket towards the Old Town, you're going to go down a really nice pedestrian street, which I will mispronounce, so I'm going to put that on the screen. But it has tons of little shops, restaurants, bars. It is a very hustling and bustling little place. Another place which I really enjoyed was the Warsaw Uprising Museum. The movie The Pianist also talks about this a little bit, but it was really interesting to go and read a little bit more about what happened during that time. The day I was there, it was actually free, so I don't know if it is always free, but I happened to get in on a good day, I guess. But even if you don't go inside the museum, the outside has some pretty cool statues and artwork that you can take a look at. And then like I mentioned, in the Royal Baths Park, there's a castle whose name I'll put up on the screen. And it used to be a retreat for the Polish royalty. And now it has a really nice view of the park and also has a little restaurant inside. So now I know you're wondering, how much did it all cost? Well, like I said, I used hotel points to stay here. So I stayed for 4 days and I spent 2,400 hotel points, 24,000 hotel points per night. I actually have the Marriott card, and so I had one free night. So I only needed to pay for 3 nights of points. So for accommodation, I spent 0. One tip about the Marriott too, which unfortunately, because of the way my trip was laid out, it didn't work out, which was kind of silly of me because I had already planned something else with somebody else. Anyway, the 5th night is free. So I basically wasted a whole night. So don't do what I do. Learn from my mistakes. 5th night is free. If you book 5 nights, you only pay for 4. And in case you're wondering how much the hotel would have actually cost if I would have paid for it, it was about $200 per night. And so, like I said, because I could get access to the lounge, I had free breakfast every day. There was like a midday snack, which was basically like little finger sandwiches. And then there was a happy hour, which was essentially dinner. So I only went out for lunch once with a friend. And so my total dining out cost was $22. For groceries, I spent 0. For entertainment, I spent $11, and that was basically the cost of the walking tour. For shopping, I spent $19, and this is actually a good story. I had a Uniqlo hoodie, a sunscreen hoodie that I've been wearing for way too long, and it was starting to fray. And I was so happy to see that Warsaw actually had a Uniqlo store. And so I went there, and lo and behold, they were having a sale. So that's normally a $40 hoodie. I got it for half off, a new one. And so that was a score for sure. So if you are traveling, full-time traveling, Warsaw has a lot of good shopping opportunities for brands that you might be more familiar with. Sometimes it's hard to find brands that you're a little more familiar with and that you know fit you or whatever. So if you are passing through Warsaw, that's a good place to pick up things. For transportation, I spent $32, and that was the bus from Vilnius to get to Warsaw, and then a couple of little public transportation uses, but that was only like maybe $3 or $4. And then for fixed costs, I spent $24, and as always, this includes my phone, my credit card fees, any health insurance, any subscriptions that I pay for annually, any cloud storage or anything like that, security that I pay for annually. So that's all wrapped up into a total for the year, and then I just prorate it out depending on how many days I stay. So all in all, I spent $108 when I was there for 4 days, which comes out to $27 a day. So you can see where hotel points can really help you save a lot of money, especially in more expensive cities. Of course, if I was paying out of my pocket, I wouldn't have gone to the Sheraton and spent $200 a night. I probably would have found a place for, maybe $75 or $100 a night instead. But still, it can help you to cut costs a lot, especially when you're traveling faster or when you're traveling in more expensive cities. However, just don't do like I did and basically waste a whole free night of staying. Make sure you pay attention to that. So if you have IHG Premier status, then you use points, you get the 4th night free. And if you have Marriott, then you get the 5th night free if you use points. So just remember that when you're booking. And before I finish, I want to tell you a couple of places to eat. If you've never been to Poland, you definitely have to try the milk bars. That is basically like a cafeteria style place where back in the day when it was the workers, they were feeding the workers. So they're inexpensive, local cafeteria style places, and they've kept that kind of style. So one that I would recommend is called Bar Bambino, and it is kind of over near the Sheraton. And then if you want pierogies, because everyone wants to try pierogies when they're in Poland, the place that I went, I'll put the name on the screen, is a very local place, not very expensive. So that is the cost that I incurred for my lunch. We got 3 different kinds of pierogies and a beer. So that's what you can get for $22, basically. The other thing that's very important to know is the word for ice cream, which is, I'll put it on the screen because I don't want to mispronounce it, but it looks like if you were going to pronounce it in English, it would be Lodi, but I'm probably totally butchering that. So those are the things that you should try if you are in Warsaw. So hopefully that was helpful if you're planning a trip to Warsaw. And if you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Have you been to Warsaw? And if so, what was your favorite thing about it? And if you like this video, please subscribe or give it a like. And thank you very much for watching, and happy travels.